All right, y'all, we're going to start this meeting. Welcome, everyone, to the Durango City Council regular meeting of November 2nd, and it is 5:32. If any of you would like to speak in public comment that is not associated with a specific agenda item, please sign up on the document over here that says public comment. If you want to speak during a specific agenda item, please sign up also on that sheet. Thank you. May we have a roll call, please, Ms. Phillips?
Certainly. Councilor Bosman?
Present.
Councilor Buell?
Here.
Councilor Youssef?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Present.
Mayor Baxter?
Present. May we have the introduction of the translator, please?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ruth and I am here with the CLC. I'm here tonight with my peer, Diana Ruiz. And thank you so much to the organizers for making sure that you're practicing language justice. We always want to make sure that everybody's able to listen, speak, and participate in the language of their hearts or the language that they feel most comfortable with. So on Zoom, you can go ahead and select your language. Today we have English and Spanish. Once it's turned on, you will see the globe icon on there. And you can also say mute original audio. If you are on a tablet or a cell phone, you will see the three dots, the say more, and on there you can also select your language. And if you are speaking today, please remember to speak at a conversational pace, just to make sure that we have enough time to interpret everything that is being said. And I will repeat this in Spanish. Una vez más, muchas gracias a todos, todas, todex, por practicar justicia del lenguaje. Gracias a los organizadores de este evento por siempre asegurarse de que todos puedan hablar, leer, escuchar y participar en el idioma de sus corazones. Así que para hacer eso vamos a utilizar la opción de interpretación de Zoom el día de hoy. Ya está encendida, pueden elegir su idioma, pueden apagar el audio original. Si están en una tableta o un celular, pueden ver los tres puntitos que dice more o más. Ahí también pueden elegir su idioma. Y si van a hablar el día de hoy, por favor, recuerden de hablar a un ritmo cómodo. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth. Next item is the identification of any actual or perceived conflicts of interest by council with any item on the agenda. No? Wonderful, great, thank you. Now we're ending the public participation phase, and if any of you have entered, since I said this, if you want to speak during public participation, please sign up on the public participation sheet. And if you want to speak about any specific item on the agenda, there's also an agenda item sheet there that for those that have public comment. This section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide comments or ask questions regarding items that are not scheduled for a hearing or public testimony, or that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to the questions from the dais. Council should address their comments directly to the City Council. As this is a virtual meeting, the avenues for public participation have changed. All written comments received by the City Clerk by noon today have been delivered to Council and will be summarized in the meeting minutes. You will each have 3 minutes to speak. May I get the sheet?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. When your name is called, please come up to the podium and speak into the microphone so we can hear you. There will be a timer on the set that will tell you how much time you have left to speak. Greg Hoke, also please let us know if you're a city resident. Greg Hoke?
Good evening. I'm actually going to speak about this process, not what I want to speak about under public participation. I just want to briefly, less than 3 minutes, talk about what this is. I mean, as I understand it, the three-minute rule was instituted about 5 years ago under Mayor Marbury. And I can tell you that after I counted them up, after 35 years of working for the city, I probably worked for about 60 different councils because they change every 2 years, and about 200 city councilors. And it was always, could you speak under 5 minutes or less? And this lady who just spoke to us about speaking in a conversational pace, you can't do that in 3 minutes, and including be even pleasant to you all when we're talking. And I just feel that, community engagement, you've got a position for that, and yet I don't feel engaged with you. And people that I've spoken to about this section of the agenda, we speak to you, but we get no response, and we get no response after the meeting to what we say. And we write letters and get no response. The mayor, you do speak at the end of things sometimes to say, well, we should go speak to the Durango Fire District. Well, that's not our government. We don't even have any representation from the city on it. So I just wanted to recommend that you seriously consider changing this part of the agenda to where there's actually meaningful public comment in a non-rushed way. Thanks. Minute and a half.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Lisa Ray, please.
Hello again. My name is Lisa
Oh, sorry.
Ray, and you have received a letter from me over the weekend in which Mayor Baxter and Mr. Madrigal have responded. Thank you very much. But this is more personal. I live in Durango, and I have for 40 years. Durango turned me into an unabashed climate activist. Not because we do great work on climate, we don't, but because we have so much to lose, and we are. In 2008, I was so excited and had so much hope when people came together to develop a plan that resulted in the KEEP. Now, after the 4th revision of the plan, my hope is all but gone. Now, my feelings are akin to those of Greta Thunberg's blah, blah, blah in her address last month. Study, 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 revise, 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 when what we need is fund, 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 then act, act, act. You say the holdup is money. I say it's priorities. We have the money. It comes in the form of an electricity tax on the usage by every household and business in this town. It goes to pay for whatever council deems as a priority. The 2 community-wide energy goals adopted in 2019 are obviously not a priority. In 2017, over 1,500 residents and 150 businesses asked the city to make it a priority. The city didn't hear us, and many opportunities to act have been missed. We have instead wasted precious time, and it has cost us money. So I am here to ask the city again to create an energy fund, preferably using the franchise fees, to develop an implementation plan, to invest money, to take measurable actions, to set an example, and then help us help ourselves. Our taxes should be used for that purpose. We all love this place, and we want to see it thrive. And I have a plan, actually a guide here that was questioned by Mr. Bosman at one of the city council meetings that I would like for you to review. Could I approach and hand these out to you guys?
Yes, that would
Or
be
should I
great.
just hand it
Yeah, you can
here?
just give it to
Yes.
Amy and she'll make sure we get it. Appreciate that. Thank you, Lisa.
Regarding the ICLEI guidance.
Wonderful. Thank you,
very
Lisa.
much.
Appreciate it. Werner Haber.
This is a rare occasion where I'm actually going to read a statement. Council and Manager Madrigal, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad we have this opportunity to talk or present my opinion. My name is Werner Heiber, and I live on 131 Larkspur Street in Durango. As elected officials serving the city of Durango, you are not just meeting present needs, but you have to know about and support the decisions of previous councils. I'm here to speak about some of these as they apply to energy efficiency and renewable energy. For the past 20 years, there has been growing concern in our community about climate change, and several actions have been undertaken, which Lisa Ray just described some of them in her statement. The KEEP, the 2017 to 2019 actions, there has been ongoing effort in making our community more sustainable and more responsive to climate change. As you are obligated, I urge you to support the 2019 Council vote approving greenhouse gas emission reduction and renewable energy goals by setting aside funding in the 2022 budget to implement these goals. Right now, as much as we can tell, there's no funding in the budget. First, we all have a moral responsibility to today's young people reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we have some young people here. Students from the Fort were going to come, but they couldn't make it. Second, because at the less than 10-year return of investment, local renewable electricity is also the financially prudent action. This is the rare case where a council decision, instead of spending, actually will be saving money in the long term. Since the comprehensive McKinstry proposal was considered by council to be too expensive and put on hold, despite that it is supported by a $1 million grant, how do you intend to proceed ensuring progress? Keep in mind that leasing PV systems, photovoltaic systems, is an option and requires no upfront capital investment and can be completed in a few months. Also, there are at least 3 qualified local solar installers able to propose power purchase agreements or lease PV installations. Finally, where are the sustainability goals reflected in the budget and how are they tracked, like greenhouse gas reduction? ICLEI, of which Durango is a member, can provide guidance for any sustainability topic. That's what Lisa was talking about. To summarize, with the city sustainability coordinator, Imogen Ainsworth, having resigned more than a month ago, it is essential that you enable her replacement by setting aside the needed funding, including preparing an implementation plan with metrics to ensure progress. City Council made a commitment in 2019, and today's Council has to meet the agreement upon for the 2030 greenhouse gas reduction and renewable energy goal. Another year of inaction is simply not acceptable.
Thank you, Werner.
Thank you.
Dick White.
My name is Dick White. I live at 575 East 8th Street. As you know, I have served on the City Council for 8 years from 2011 to 2019. Much has changed since I left the council, not least international recognition of the impacts of the climate crisis. Yesterday, negotiators began their critically important climate meetings in Glasgow, Scotland. As of today, the announced commitments to greenhouse gas emissions reductions still fall short, far short, of cutting emissions by the necessary 50% by 2030, 100% by 2050. The longer governments, national, state, and local, delay action, the more difficult it will and more costly it will be to meet the targets. Climate protection and sustainability should be the lens through which you and the staff view every action of the city. That includes both the operating budget, $84 million as proposed, and the $61 million capital projects. as well as efforts to improve the housing affordability, which you are working on. The city's priorities, as manifested in the proposed budget, explicitly allocate only 1.25% for sustainability, either in dollars or in personnel. Although climate action is embedded in the draft Sustainability Action Plan and GHG reductions are the #1 criterion for prioritization of implementation steps, specific climate actions are distributed through all through that still incomplete document. The #1 implementation step is to develop an annual implementation strategy. But who is going to do that now that Imogen Ainsworth has resigned? The plan includes short-term implementation steps for 2021 to 2023. But this year's nearly gone, and the 2022 budget is before you now. How much progress can one newly hired staff member make in a single year? This effort requires a team led by a knowledgeable professional and assembled from existing staff across departments, as well as from the community. Such an effort requires clear direction that ramping up to climate action is an overwhelming priority for the City Council. Adding 23 new positions without increasing sustainability staff fails to assert that priority. The city's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals announced 2 years ago were welcome. Thanks to initiatives by LPEA, they are achievable now, as they did not appear to be earlier. However, considering the most recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, they are now inadequate. The city, like every other entity, private and public, should be asserting science-based targets that will meet the goals of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, and even more importantly, providing the staff needed to identify and take aggressive actions to meet those goals.
Thank you, Dick. Appreciate it. Lars Hansen?
Thank you, kindly. If you may, before you punch in the clock, I'd just lend a hand to the people in support of the climate. Thank you. Pat yourself in the back. Well done. Live 1323 East 2nd Avenue. I'm here too. As you know, I'm here to talk about the proposed fire station in the 9R building. And I'm absolutely not done with this one. We were at a study session recently. We were addressed as a handful of people throwing a fit, and that's absolutely not true. I fail to have a conversation with anybody over the last 2-3 months here where I bring this topic up, where they say, that is a fantastic idea. That is exactly where the fire station needs to go. I have heard nothing but big question mark. Either they didn't know about it, or they say, really? We supported the tax hike, and now you want to do that? It doesn't make sense to people. I'd encourage you to listen to the public. We are more than just show up here. It's very clear that the decision that's being made now to move the fire department into this building, into this location, into this area of town, is a product of previous city councils' failure to make it happen in a place where they don't butt into a partial residential neighborhood. I encourage you to dig your heels in. Like, this is not a well-informed decision. This is a decision that is a result of failure of action of prior city councils. I encourage you to dig your heels in. I have not heard anybody on the council say, this is a bad idea. I encourage you to step up as leaders and promote a better solution for everybody. We want the fire station to have good conditions, and we also want to protect our property investments. Absolutely, the place where we raise our kids. I think I got a little bit more here. I think a lot about this, and it's aggravating to me. It's disappointing to me, and it's confusing to me. And I would say, go ahead and step up. Think about Holly Jobson. who are literally going to have a fire department in her backyard. There's an alley between it, but in her backyard. I would say, I encourage you today, if you think that's a good idea, I would say, while we have you on the record, I would encourage you to step forward and say, sorry, Holly, too bad. Anybody? Any takers? I didn't think so. Anyway, I encourage you to think about this and think about what would your life be like if you lived in Holly's house and a fire department moved in there. She's just a small piece of this puzzle. There's many people that don't think this is a good idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Lars. Cameron Garland.
My name is Cameron, and that's Iris, and we represent the self-formed youth organization Durango Climate Action. As high school students who have grown up in Durango, we have witnessed and been horrified by the rapidly changing climate and the lack of fight against this our entire lives. We've been forced to sit back as our futures have been stolen by adults in power who care more about what is economically feasible than saving our planet from disaster. We have been told over and over that we are too young to care or make a change, and that we should just sit back, relax, and enjoy our childhood while it lasts. But we can't enjoy our youth when the world it depends on is being ripped out from under us. So with that, we would like to ask the City Council and our hometown to take this into consideration and deliver on your promises regarding the energy goals and funding allocations in the 2022 budget. We have the money. All we need is the time and willpower to create an energy fund. We hope that these small changes will have a much bigger impact and start to create a future for Durango where our children and our children's children will not have to worry about their world falling apart around them, and where we will survive this crisis and live our lives to the fullest extent they can be lived. Thank you for your time and have a good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate it. Charles Shaw.
Hi there. Excuse me. Let's see. I guess I'm really here to ask you to please reconsider moving the police station to the 9R building. And I understand that the city is not in on the real estate deal, and you have no control over that deal. But, and I know a lot of people have come out against the fire station, and I've kind of stayed away from that for a lot of reasons. But what the city keeps claiming that it's not in their court right now and it's between the school district and the fire station. But if you signed on to investigating moving the police station over there, you've essentially given the green light to this concept. And so I would encourage you to maybe take a few steps back from that and let this whole fire station thing play out. And the reason is it goes against pretty much everything the city has said they want for this area. And you know, I mean, just a few things. There's the URA, which, you know, encourages density and commercial activity. This is anti to those things. Vitality, a police station next to Buckley Park. I mean, that's a park killer. No offense, but no one wants to hang out and listen to music and be in a park next to a police station with, you know, security lighting on the parking lot there. And the city said they want housing density in this area. This is anti to that. Connectivity to downtown. This is the gateway to that midtown neighborhood. And this is going to completely cut that off. Yes, I know they've talked about a little pathway, but it's not going to draw people to this neighborhood. You know, again, there's sales tax and property tax revenue that the URA is designed to encourage. This is, again, going against all of that. And then, I mean, as to this climate issue, they're going to demolish a 35,000 square foot, perfectly good masonry building that actually does have some period style and is completely functional. I would think as a community, we could be more creative than that, than to demolish perfectly good things, especially now with climate. And I don't know if any of you are in the construction biz, but construction costs are crazy right now. So to throw that thing away is just insanity from my standpoint. And so how am I doing on time here? And then also, you're going to sign on to a historic building. The city has no track record of preserving historic buildings. Certainly the fire department does. There are over 310 huge historic windows in that building. I restored them almost 20 years ago, and it was a $750,000 project. They're up for that again. Hal does not know what he's getting into, and I know the city, no offense, is not capable of doing a good job on that project.
Charles,
and this is essentially going to be a historic building in a sea of pavement, and I just don't think it's what you want. So please do not just go in with these people on this project that is just unwise.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. I do want to make one correction, though, to something that was stated. The city has not signed on to moving the police department into that building. We have not even gotten to the point yet of considering what if we are interested in that or not, what it could cost or not. So at this point in time, there is absolutely no direction going towards moving the police department into that building.
Thank you, and that's great news. And please don't vote. I do know there is staff.
So Charles, thank you. Mary Oswald, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Oswald, and I live at 585 East 31st Street, and I'm a city resident. I'm also speaking on the 9R building and Buckley Park. I do not live in the neighborhood, but I view this as something that affects every single person in our community. I first want to say, taking what Greg said into account, I appreciate the fact that you guys are really listening to us, at the beginning of your council meetings. However, I must say, I feel prior to coming here, that coming here maybe is a little futile. And I feel that I'm afraid you've already made your minds up regarding approving the 9R building sale to the Durango Fire Protection District. I think it's reinforced by the letter that was signed by some of the ex-mayors and city council people that you guys have received. But I think sometimes people in your positions operate from a position of looking at process over people. Yeah, this building checks off a lot of boxes. It's right in the middle of town, which is where the fire station needs to be. It's big enough of a space, which the fire station needs. Check, check, check. And you're not looking at the big picture as to what is affected by this huge bad decision forever. It's gonna negatively alter the character of a well-established neighborhood forever. It's to think that parking is not going to end up resulting in destroying many of those old-growth trees is a fallacy. I've read that 66, if it does go through to the police department, 66 parking spaces go along with that, along with who knows what for the fire department. So I feel that there's such better options right in front of us. The thought of a second Smiley building, an extension of the Smiley building in that building, and also affordable housing to teachers. I'm at this Smiley building 2 or 3 times a week. I see what the Shaws have done to that building. It's magical, and hundreds of people take advantage of that building every single day. And also, the fire department, all they want is the space. They got the space. Fix what they have right now, make it a beautiful space where they currently are occupying the space, and make make it be a win-win.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mary. Appreciate it. I also want to correct a misunderstanding there too, which is that the city does not approve the sale of that building between anyone. It's a private real estate agreement between the 9R School District and the Durango Fire Protection District, and we have no authority to approve it one way or the other. That's not in our venue. So just wanted you to know that. Any other public comment from our virtual world?
City resident. I think so. Is that an affirmative?
You're breaking up quite a bit.
I am. That's unfortunate.
Now you sound great.
Resident. I want to start. Basically, I do share with Lars the label of whiner that's in the fire district meeting joint session on October 21st. So I address you as that as well. I do want to take the moment to invite you to read the letter that I did attach and send for the record. But as well, I want to thank the public for participation. In your materials, a potential revised lot line for Buckley Park subdivision is included. But for the public participation, that would not have taken place. So who does get the credit for, saving this erosion of Buckley Park? Well, it's the public. And I want to particularly thank Greg Hoke for bringing this to the attention of anyone that's looking at the record with his letter and excellent analysis back in September and work that preceded that as well. So I want to thank Greg in particular and all the other people that have brought this to the attention of the City Council and to the result that is being apparently being considered later on today. And I want to thank you for listening to the public. If there's an opportunity to enhance that listening opportunity, I want to second that along with Greg. Along with Greg Hoke. So that's all I have, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ted. We appreciate it. Are there any other virtual commenters?
Yes, I have John Simpson on the line.
Wonderful.
Mayor Baxter, John Simpson, 1831 Crestview Drive. I would like to discuss my concerns with the 2022 budget so that the public hearing next week will be beneficial, as it's only a 3-minute time period. The budget process is a great time to review the legal issues that are the basis for this budget. First, the Constitution must be followed. Since Durango has de-Bruced, the constitutional requirements are limited. However, council must ensure all fees are legal pursuant to the Constitution. Next year, staff is asking to continue charging every utility user $3 per month for spring cleanup and fall cleanup. This fee is added to every utility bill, whether or not the citizens uses that service. The revenue is deposited in the general fund, where it can be used for any number of things such as the police, city council salaries, etc. The city's own ordinance for trash contradicts this fee. The ordinance says users can contact the city for special pickup and can be charged a fee. Staff needs to be aware that there's concern that this fee has many aspects of a tax, and a tax that was not voted on by the citizens. Next, Colorado statute must be followed, which is commonly known as state budget law. Since we're a home rule municipality, there's very little you must follow here except to complete an audit. This leaves the most important document, the charter. Charter is the playbook that the citizens and councils have agreed to play by. Council has no option not to follow charter, even if they don't like it. For the city of Durango, there's only one chapter in the charter that describes what must be done during the budget process, so it should be easy to follow. As you review the budget, make sure you check each of the requirements of the charter, because for years, charter has been ignored. This is important for many reasons. For example, for years, long-term debt has not been provided as part of the budget. There's a debt for Wilson Gulch that the citizens did not vote on. This debt needs to be discussed because it wasn't discussed sufficiently when it was first issued. Next, a long-term plan for capital projects is required, which includes future costs associated with capital projects. This is important because although the city is trying to put forward a lot of capital projects this year, there may not be a sustainable revenue source for the capital projects divisions in future years. Also, all interfund transfers must be approved by council by ordinance. Staff is proposing a new capital projects divisions that can move more water from water and sewer to the general fund. Although the details have not been specified, it appears staff would like to transfer money unilaterally from the enterprise funds to the general fund, which charter prohibits. Next meeting, let's keep it simple. The budget starts with all the funds in the 2020 CAFR, adds revenues from 2021 and 2022, and then subtracts expenses from 2021 and 22, and the final fund balance is calculated. Staff should be using all funds shown in the CAFR and the fund balances from the CAFR, and not confusing the situation by adding funds that are not audited, such as water construction funds. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Are there any other virtual commenters?
No, Mayor, that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, move on.
Mayor Baxter,
Oh,
I signed up and I didn't speak. I said I was going to speak. I've got a 3-minute talk.
yes, I understand that, Greg, but you spoke for a minute and a half during your
Well, then I'll see if I can get it done in a minute and a half. But I feel I have the right to do this, so. I've spoken to you about a public meeting before. Here's the reason why. The situation here of a public entity selling a property to another public entity for use that has to be approved by a third public entity creates a unique catch-22 which needs to be recognized and resolved. With any other public use which isn't a public use, a rezone would be required involving review and approval of a new land use with its own public hearing. No development plans are required in a rezone. What's happening here is that a major land use change is being proposed, but there's no hearing required because the PB zone is not being changed. Land use code never anticipated this unique situation, depriving Durango citizens of a public hearing on a major land use change. Changing an old school building with offices into essentially an office building with a large garage with custodial residences warrants a public forum, not a hearing, to gauge whether Durango citizens truly support this land use change at this location. A new fire station should instead be located on an arterial street, Camino del Rio, which has direct and speedy access. In other words, the existing fire station site. The city council should hold a public forum on this proposed land use change rather than waiting until a major site plan has been submitted, as by then it will be too late to challenge the land use. With respect to an emergency services center, that's the big picture. Online search shows that there's no examples of that in the country. And this issue is one of the most consequential decisions for the city's future. I want to point out the police is an auto-intensive use. They're in their cars a lot, and fire is auto-intensive. This is going to be too much traffic for this neighborhood and street system to bear. Thank you.
thank you, Greg. Okay.
Dick has his hand up.
I'm sorry, yeah, just Dick.
If I might take about 10 seconds.
I'm sorry, if we do this for you, then we have to do it for the next person, I'm sorry. This is a very challenging aspect of running this meeting, and we're trying to do our best to get everybody the same opportunities. So I appreciate your consideration of that. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to item 7, which is an executive session. There is a need for the City Council to meet in executive session to discuss personnel matters related to municipal judge position as permitted under CRS 24-6-402 4FI. State law requires that 2/3 of the quorum present must vote in the affirmative in order to convene an executive session. Do we have a motion?
I'll move into executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? No? May we have a roll call, please, or a vote, sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Counselor Buell?
Yes.
Counselor Bosman's?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Baxter?
Yes, thank you. Okay, I reconvene this meeting at 6:43. For the record, council met in executive session to discuss personnel matters related to municipal judge position as permitted under CRS 24-6-402 4FI. No decisions were made. If anyone who participated in the executive session believes the discussion went beyond the proper scope of the executive session, please state your objections now. Seeing none, our next item of business is 7.2, discussion and possible action concerning personnel matters related to the municipal judge position. And if there's any discussion, we can do that. And if not, we could entertain a motion.
I'll move to appoint Sarah Law as our municipal judge. I'll second.
Do we have any further discussion? I want to say that I think Sarah will make a wonderful municipal judge for the city of Durango. Thank you.
I want to thank Sarah for her past service as assistant municipal judge, or however the title was. Thank you, Sarah.
And we look forward to working with you.
May we have a vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Counselor Buell?
Yes.
Counselor Bosman's?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Baxter?
Yes. Thank you. Now we're on to item 8, review of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow the city council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 9. May we have a reading of the consent agenda, please, Ms. Phillips?
Item 8.1 through 8.3 are approval of minutes. 8.1, the minutes from the October 19th study session. 8.2, the minutes from the October 19th special meeting. 8.3, the minutes from the October 19th City Council regular meeting. Item 8.4 is discussion and possible action concerning Resolution R 2021-63, authorizing additional appropriation to the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund for 2021 transit fleet replacement. Items 8.5 through 8.7 are requests for public hearings with the proposed date of November 16th, 2021. 8.5 is to consider the 2022 annual appropriation ordinances. 8.6 is to consider the Yonkers preliminary minor subdivision. 8.7 is to consider the Twin Buttes Parcel F preliminary minor subdivision.
Thank you very much. Are there any items that a councilor would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? May we have a vote call, please?
Counselor Buell?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor Bosman's?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Baxter?
Yes, thank you. We are now on to public hearings, legislative and policy-related hearings. We had 11.1.1, a public hearing to consider the 2022 proposed budget and highway users tax funds. That will be continued to November 16th. So on to 11.1.2, a public hearing to consider an ordinance defining the City of Durango departmental structure for 2022.
Yes, Mayor and Council, what we have is the ordinance that defines our City of Durango departmental structure by charter. We are required to define each department within ordinance. So to continue to make sure that we are compliant with the charter, we are adopting a new policy where every year with the budget, we will approve the department structure that is as proposed in the budget or as approved in the budget. So this will be a new process as we move forward that will happen annually. And what you have before you is just the ordinance that approves the departmental structure that is signified within our organizational chart. There are no changes towards it, other than, I believe, IT, or information services would now be called information technology, which it's more commonly referred to.
Are there any questions from council for Mr. Madrigal? No. Do we have a motion?
Do we have the number?
Oh, Dirk, do we have an ordinance number on that?
Yes, we do, but this requires a hearing, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. I have to open the public hearing. I forget about these things. I just came back from vacation, so I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have any public comment on this agenda item? Is there anyone virtually waiting?
Yes, Mayor. Excuse me, I have John Simpson.
Okay, great. Sorry, John, I didn't mean to exclude you. I just not quite on top of it today.
No problem, Mayor Baxter. This is John Simpson. For many years, I've been pushing for this org chart to get the Public Works Director and the engineering together and away from the planning department. So I think this is a great first step and compliments on getting that set up. My concern, however, is the Capital Projects Division. And, I think this should be held until we can work through the budget process. There's a lot of questions with this Capital Projects Division of how it will be funded, how money will flow between this division and the water fund, the sewer fund. I see a need for a lot of what you're trying to do with this Capital Projects Division. For example, funding some of the 2015 sales tax projects, associating some costs there with that. However, I think, listening to Parks and Rec Department, they have serious concerns with this Capital Projects Division. I'm not sure where you guys will fall on this. So it seems a little premature to be adopting this org chart with that Capital Projects Division until we work through the public process of the budget and everything in a couple weeks. So I'd ask you to consider making a motion to approve the org chart with the Capital Projects Division removed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Okay, so now I can close the public hearing. Are there any further discussion by council? Do we have a motion?
Do you have an ordinance as
Number?
well?
Yeah. Yes, it's 2021 well, actually, the ordinance comes up later in the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's under introduction of ordinances, so maybe we'd be best to wait until bring it up then.
Okay, so do we not need a motion at this point then?
No, this is just a hearing.
Okay, all right. So since we have no further discussion, I'll move on to 11.1.1. Nope, that was what we just did. Sorry, quasi judicial hearings. 11.2.1, a continued public hearing to consider the Buckley Park preliminary minor subdivision. Do we have a staff presentation for this? Oh, thank you, Scott.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Scott Scheimer, City Development Department. I have a handout here for your reference. It's also going to be in the slides, but I'll just pass this around while I get the slideshow up. Tom doesn't come in and yell at me. I think I'm sharing my screen appropriately. This is a continued public hearing from your last meeting. You gave staff some direction to go back and work with the applicant and revise the proposed property line for this Buckley Park subdivision. So we've done that. And what I just handed out is a revised plat or a snapshot of the revised plat showing how the line's been changed. Just a quick summary again, this is a request from the school district to subdivide the property into 2 lots. Previously, the Buckley Park parcel was shown as 1.44 acres. With the revisions, it's now shown as 1.66 acres. And the upper portion of the property is 3.08 acres. That contains the historic high school and the auxiliary buildings. That additional almost quarter acre was added to preserve the mature trees up at the top of the slope and recreational access, primarily sledding, up on the south corner. And again, just to reiterate, this does not affect the existing uses at this time. There's no changes to the current uses of the property. So this is a map I showed you last time. The blue line was what was previously proposed, and the yellow dashed line is a better represents, not to scale, but roughly where the new property line is proposed. I'll show you this in more detail, but that corner where there's the jog, that parallels the existing parking lot. It's between 4.9 and 5 feet off the edge of that parking lot. It was previously about 14 feet off of that edge of the asphalt. The line has been extended on the north side, and I forget the exact number, to 220 feet in depth, and on the south side to 234 feet, which is between 35 and 45 feet longer than the previous property line. So we think it's been a good negotiation. We're happy with where the line's drawn now, and I'm fully ready to give credit to the public that showed up and advocated for the revisions, and I think that's part of the public process. That's why we have hearings, and I think it's resulted in a good outcome.
Could you go back I just had one question on that. So the north end of it, where the yellow line is, does that include the section that now is where the porta potties have sat before?
Yeah, it's right on the east side of that concrete pad.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
So again, just to orient us, particularly, looking at on the side of this photograph where a lot of them mature trees are, and you can see where the parking lot jogs, and that property line really does follow the existing parking lot. I'll show you a better picture of the lower corner, and there's a grove of spruce trees that is now fully within the park boundary because of the change. This is the plat, and I just highlighted the property line and then the edge of the parking lot there for reference. This is not the official plat that will be recorded. When we do the subdivision plats, we take off things like building footprints and parking lots, but they're on here just for your reference to get a sense of where everything, how it relates to each other. These are some of the things we talked about last time. I won't go over them in great detail, but this was all part of our initial review to make sure all the city facilities necessary for accessing and maintaining Buckley Park are all included in the park boundary. I showed you this map last time, and we talked about the possibility of future park improvements. And then this shows a couple different angles looking up at the hillside, the mature trees, those, again, you can just get a sense of, at the rise of the hill, that's really where these mature trees kind of end, and all of that is now in the Buckley Park boundary. This is that corner I was talking about. It's hard to overlay a property line on a photo, but that dashed line is roughly where the property line will go, right adjacent to the parking lot, and this grove of spruce trees again will be in Buckley Park. And you can see that's the flat area where kids kind of stage for sledding, and there's some trails through there to get across the park. That's all within the park boundary. This is something that has come up just during our research and the history of how this whole school property came to be. I showed you the right-of-way abandonments that the city granted for the school district. The one through Buckley Park was an alley, and then the other two were street right-of-ways that we have abandoned in the past. And so it's just interesting as we dug into the history to show how the city has contributed over time, both to the park and into 9R.
I have a question, Scott. Could you go back on that slide, please? Thank you. That item 1, you've got it in square feet. Do you have any sense of acreage, what that would
An acre is 43,560 square feet,
Okay.
so roughly a little more than a fifth.
A fifth of an acre, okay. And then I just also had a question about 2 and 3 and any options the city has should the usage change there.
Yeah. The alley abandonment, and Dirk, if you want to chime in at all, please do. I think he's seen some of the abandonment ordinances. The alley abandonment does have a reversion clause. If it ceases to be used for school purposes or school lands, it says something like that, it should revert back to the city. The other two don't have that reversion language.
Thank you.
These are the strategic plan and comprehensive plan goals related to the subdivision, primarily about management and maintenance of parks. We've reviewed the subdivision based on the Land Use and Development Code. We feel like it complies with the necessary approval criteria. And so we're recommending that you move to approve the revised plat for the Buckley Park minor subdivision and direct the applicant to prepare the final plat. There's a few cleanup items that still need to be done. It won't change the layout of the lots or anything. And then once that's done and acceptable to staff, this authorizes the mayor to sign the final plat Mylars. I have extra copies of this. I'll put it on the table if anybody else wants to see them.
Wonderful. Is that the end of your presentation, Scott? Wonderful. I'll open up the public hearing then. Do we have any public comment on this topic? Are there any virtual commenters? Is that Teresa up there?
There's nobody online with their hand raised.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Do we have any further questions or comments from council?
I just wanted to say, someone in public comment said today that they felt like coming in and talking was like futile and that we already had our minds made up. And I definitely agree with Scott when he said that like the change in property line was spurred by someone coming in to talk because it was an easy change and, you know, staff made quick motion to change it. And I appreciate it. And I think it just makes it that much better of project that we're doing and keeping this amazing piece of property for us. So
yeah, I agree. And I think that in the 2 weeks it took you to do this, which is a minimal amount of time, we've made great, this is awesome. So thank you very much, staff, for working on that. Do we have a motion? Or do we need a motion? Yes, okay.
I'll move to approve the revised plat for the Buckley Park minor subdivision, direct the applicant to prepare the final plat and Mylars, and authorize the mayor to sign the final plat Mylars once all necessary revisions are made.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, may we have a vote, please, Ms. Phillips?
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Buell?
Yes.
Councilor Bosmans?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Baxter?
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, Amy just pointed out if we could go back to 11.1.1 and actually get a motion to continue that.
Oh, yes,
That's
okay.
appreciative. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I didn't realize. Do we have a motion on 11.1.1?
I'll move to continue the public hearing to consider the 2022 proposed budget and highway users fees to November 16th, 2021.
I'll second. Any further discussion? May we have a vote, please?
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Bosmans?
Yes.
Councilor Buell?
Yes.
Mayor Baxter?
Yes. So we're on to number 12, City Attorney. Dirk, do you have anything you want to discuss?
I do not.
Do you want to give us the ordinance numbers for the next two ordinances so that we're prepared with
Yes,
them?
I can. The next one, 13.1, is 2021-22. And the one in 11, 13.2 is 2021-23.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, so then we'll move on to items 13, introduction of ordinances. 13.1, an ordinance amending Chapter 27 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango, Land Use and Development Code by the amendment of Chapter 2, 4, and 7 related to motor vehicle and heavy equipment in the Central Business District, electric vehicle regulations and definitions, and declaring an effective date. Do we have a presentation on this, Dirk?
Yeah, briefly, the council reviewed this item at the October 19th meeting, and council directed the preparation of an ordinance to amend the LUDC as stated with the cooperation of community development. That ordinance is before you tonight for first reading. So on a motion from council, this would be ordinance 2021-22.
Wonderful. Do we have any discussion or questions on this ordinance? May we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-22.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? May we have a vote, please?
Counselor Buell?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor Bosmans?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
And Mayor Baxter?
Yes. We're on to item 13.2, an ordinance defining and approving the City of Durango departmental structure for 2021, confirming department head appointments and declaring an effective date.
Yes, this is the ordinance that was just discussed earlier regarding the definition of the departments via the org chart. And this is ordinance 021-23. This is for first reading tonight.
Okay, do we have any discussion? May we have a motion?
I'll move to approve ordinance O-2021-23.
I'll second.
Any discussion? No? May we have a vote, please?
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor Buell?
Yes.
Counselor Bosmans?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Baxter?
Yes. We're on to administrative. Jose Madrigal, City Manager, 14.1, a quarterly financial update.
We do have a quarterly financial update tonight for the City Council. Devin Schmidt, our Budget and Strategic Planning Manager, will be providing that presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Devin Schmidt, the Budget and Strategic Planning Manager for the Durango, and I'm going to pull up our quarterly financial update. 1 second while I share the screen. Okay, excellent. So this is the Q3 financial report for the quarter ending September 30th, 2021. I'm going to take you through each fund, and I'll pause after I get to the revenues and expenditures for any questions from council as we go through it. So starting off with the general fund expenses versus revenues, we do have a chart here that shows by month, as well as the amended budget actual year to date, 2021 encumbrances, and then 2021 actual and encumbrances. Just taking a second to pull up here. 1 second while it catches up. Don't know why it's showing a blank screen. I'm gonna stop share and try resharing and see if that works. Apologies.
Maybe reload.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that again. Maybe I'll scroll. There we go. There's our numbers. Okay, so if we're looking at the year-to-date actuals for revenues in the general fund, we have received $34,923,828. In expenses, we have spent $33,906,981 to date. What that means is that we're looking at the general fund in a positive position, and that is because through Q3, we would have typically expect to receive 66% of our revenues. Currently, revenues are at 79% of total budgeted collections, so therefore the city is ahead $5.7 million of projected budget. If we're looking at that from a revenues to expenditure standpoint, we are showing that we are $3.4 million ahead. Sales and use tax are 93% of total budget collections. All combined taxes and fees are at 89%. Charges and services are at 57%. Miscellaneous at 66%. Intergovernmental at 55%. License and permits at 58%. Fines at 65%. Assessments at 46%, and other finance sources at 72%, for a total average of 79% of total collections. Once again, the 2021 budget was prepared on a conservative estimate, not knowing what the impacts of COVID were going to present for the city. And so with that, we are showing a positive revenue analysis for the general fund. Looking at the expenditures, total general fund operating expenditures are typically at 62% through the end of Q3, so end of September. Expenditures are at 69% or 7% greater than historical when we're looking at 2015 to 2021, or approximately $3 million above historical figures. Public safety accounts for $1.6 million of the increase over the historical figures. Again, we're still looking at this as a positive because revenues exceed expenditures by 3.4. Looking at the fund balance in the general fund, so this is a snapshot in time. The fund balance we are showing is $16,672,882, and that's taking revenues and expenditures, so what's happened throughout the year and where we're at to date. Taking a deeper dive into some of the categories that exist within the general fund. General government, we have listed at a positive. General government has typically spent 64% of their budget. Has spent 64% of their budget, but has historically spent 66%. Human resources is at 61% of their budget and has historically spent 66%. Administrative services, we are showing at a caution at 68% of their budget, typically at the 66%, but with the expectation that we'll be within budget by year end. Media and community engagement are showing 70% of their fiscal 2021 budget spent, and typically they are also at 66%. Information services is at 76% and historically is at 66%. Both of these are listed at a cautionary with the expectation that we would be in budget by year end. In some cases, information services specifically, there's a lot of software contracts at the beginning of the year that are paid out, and so those costs are already accounted for. Financial services, we are showing a positive performance indicator, right on track at the 66% spent and the historical of 66%. Community development, positive with a 64% spent and historically is at 61%. Police and 911, we are showing this at a cautionary with a 74% spent and has historically spent 62%. Fire services is at 74% and has historically spent 75%. Again, positive. Public works and engineering has spent 67% of their budget and has historically been at 62%. Streets is at 64% spent and has historically been at 62%. And Parks and Recreation has spent 61% and is right on track with the 61% of a typical spend. Library, we are showing at a cautionary with 66% of their budget and has historically at this point spent 61%. Buildings is at 70%. with a normal spend of 62% at this point. And streets has spent 51% of their budget and has historically spent 61%, also resulting in a positive performance indicator. Durango Welcome Center, 72% spent when we're typically at 62, and non-departmental was at 86%, which is typically at 62%. So before I move on to, we also added the capital projects to this report so that council can see from a financial standpoint where the city is at to date on capital projects. So you can see that we have network equipment is underway, County Road 250, 251. We also have the technology enhancements, and the CDOT landscaping and art projects are all underway. Before I move on to the other funds, is there any questions that I can answer on the general fund?
A little question on, thank you for the presentation so far. On the roads, one sheet up, if, is that, oh, is the one above that, I guess. Streets, sorry. In a way, is it good that they spend less, or is it actually worse that they spend less? Because on the streets and maintenance and replacement and all those things, you argue that it would be good that they're spending and completing projects, because that's what we want, yeah? It's,
So for this report, if a particular department or fund has spent less than what has been historical as far as from a budget standpoint, we did indicate that as a positive indicator. The cautionary ones are areas where if we looked back at from 2015 to 2021, what have we normally spent by quarter three? Those are items that we are spending a little bit more in, and so that would be, for this report, that was our indication.
I'm just wondering if we should qualify that position of caution or positive or negative, or needs attention, because you might argue that it would be nice if we have a lot of the streets redone and maintained, and staff would be able to do that. So anyway, thank you.
They are 2% ahead of their spending. It may not be enough to be ahead, but they're not behind on spending.
Oh, actually, yeah, I see. I'm actually looking at it the wrong way.
But I understand your argument to get more done sooner, but I think that's...
Within the streets budget, there is street maintenance, there's also snow removal and street sweeping. And so for this presentation, those are all combined in one. So it could be that we didn't spend as much of our snow budget, for example, and things of that nature, specifically to streets. But I could certainly get some additional information about that for you if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's complex, but I appreciate it though.
Absolutely. Any other questions on the general fund before I move on?
So in general, we're further along. We're spent more of our budget than normal in expenses.
Yes.
Yeah. So are we looking to make sure that we bring those areas that are out of alignment to make sure that we're going to hit our budget by the end of the year, either through spending cuts, or it's just a timing thing, or what have you, or the possibility of needing to come back to approval from council for spending more money than our budget?
Yes, so there's a couple of factors that Cynthia has actually put in place. So we're starting to meet with departments. We do a 3+9, a 6+6, and a 9+3, which means we meet with them each quarter and we go through and we work with them to say, are you going to make it within your budget? If not, what options do we have? Because they roll up at a divisional level. So if you have, if you were planning on doing an additional contract, but your personnel was high, things of that nature. So we do work with them to make sure that we'll be within budget. If not, we would come back for an appropriation that says we're needing additional funds because we couldn't make it in that budget.
One that most concerns me is the police being significantly higher at this point. And the reason why that concerns me is take into proper account what we needed to budget for expenses, and we might have to have that conversation, or is that just a timing situation? So I don't know that you have the answer to that. But
Chief might.
Chief might, and he might not right now either, but that would be something I'd be interested in.
Mayor, I might be able to answer this question. So we had multiple retirements this year. We had 2 40-year employees, a 26-year employee, and a 25-year. The combination of those payouts for their previous sick time and their PTO time that they currently had accrued, that kind of devastated whatever salary savings we might have. So we've looked at our salary projections. We think that we probably have about $8,000 which can be in excess based off our current vacancies and what we think we're going to be able to fill throughout the rest of the year. So we think it's going to balance out. It just hits really hard right in the middle of the year. And we think it's going to balance out with these current vacancies we have as we move forward to the end of the fiscal year.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay. I'm going to scroll quickly through here. Okay, moving on to our special revenue fund. So I'm going to start with the 2005 quarter cent that we use for the debt service. So this is the expenditures versus revenues for this particular special revenue fund. So year to date, we are at 1.9 million in revenues, and expenses we are at 1.82. So we are reflecting this as a positive performance indicator. Because typically we would have collected 70% or approximately 1.4 million of total budgeted revenues. Currently, sales and use tax are at 93% collected of total budgeted sales and use tax revenues, or approximately 1.9 million in total collections. Compared to the historical actuals from 2015 to 2021, the debt service is ahead 22%, or approximately 464,000 of the projected sales and use tax collections. This fund is used for the payments for Florida Road and the library, and those are at a flat monthly rate as far as expenditures go. Looking at the fund balance, we are showing that we are currently at 132,000 in the net. However, since our revenue projections and what we're seeing are pulling stronger than what we budgeted for, we expect this to also be not a concern or an issue. Any questions on that one before I move to the other quarter cent of the 05? Okay, hearing none. So again, we are at 1.9 million in revenues. We are at 2.5 in expenditures for this fund. I'm not going to talk about the revenues again because it's the companion of the other and that would be repetitive, but this is the 2005 Open Space Parks and Trails Fund. So within here we have post maintenance, the Smart 160, park trail improvements, the Mason Center removal, and Durango Mesa Park. When we're looking at the capital projects for this particular quarter cent, we are showing, you can see here that we have the 2021 actuals versus encumbrances. So we have the Durango Mesa Park, the Mason Center, that one that's listed as no project is the interfund transfer back into the general fund. We have post-maintenance, park, trail, and rec improvements. We have open space acquisition. We have the sand volleyball courts, the economic impact study, Whitewater Park Development, Trails 2000 contracts, and the Downtown Access Camino del Rio. And that is it.
Could you go up a page, please, to the revenues and expenses on that?
Yeah.
So we've collected more revenue than we anticipated, but we're showing that we have more expenses than our revenues. Is that an item for concern?
So let me get to the fund balance of this particular one.
Because that may be where we're pulling that from?
Yes, yep. So with our fund balance, we're showing 1.9 million in fund balance for the 05. And so while we budgeted, I believe we did dip into the fund balance as part of the 2021 budget.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one? moving right along, we have the 2015 half-cent sales tax. This is for parks and multimodal expenses. So for revenues, we're at 3.9 million. For expenses, we are at 1.3. Coming down into the numbers here, so typically we would have expected to have collected 70% or approximately 2.9 million of the total budget. Currently, sales and use tax are at 93% of total budget, or approximately 3.8 million in total collections. Compared to 2015 through 2020-21, the 2015 sales tax is ahead 22%, or approximately 930,000. The projects that we have listed in here is Rotary Park, Lake Night Horse, Community Forest Plan, 32nd Street Crossing, Animas Trail Rehab. And the projects that we have underway, you can see here with our actuals and encumbrances. We have the 32nd Street grade separating crossing. That no project, once again, is the interfund transfer back into the general fund. We have the art rehab, which is to Demon Bridge. We have Santa Rita Park, ADA improvements. We have the traffic study, 32nd Street, traffic calming and connectivity, Rotary Park restrooms, downtown access, Lake Night Horse, Community Forest Plan, the Recreation Center improvements, 30th Street Connect, Park Maintenance Shop, 8th Avenue College, Whitewater Park, and the ACP to Oxbow.
I have a question on that. Can you just thank you, Devin. And I realize that Tori is not here, so I'll actually pose it to the city manager, who may not be able to answer it and need to come back. On the Animas Trail rehab to Demon Bridge and the Santa Rita Park, it looks like we've spent, maybe half in each case. So do you anticipating spending that full amount, or it'll come back to us, be put back into the budget and then be appropriated again? And if you can't answer that today, you can bring it back perhaps.
Definitely. We'll just send you, if it's all right, just send an email to the council to answer that question, because I don't know where they are with that project. However, anything that does not get spent always goes into the fund balance at the end of the year to be redirected in the next fiscal year.
I believe either Turi, during his presentation fairly recently, or we got an email about it, I can't remember which, mentioned that some unexpected issues with the Animas Trail rehab between Rank Park and Demon Bridge with the water flows, the springs and things, that they were going to need to do some more work, but they still thought they'd be able to get it done by the end of the year.
Okay, all right.
Comment was.
And if I may as well, any projects we did ask to consider, if they were not going to be completed, that they would ask for a reappropriation in the 2022 budget. So any of these projects that are still on the list that did not get completed would be asked for in that budget.
My other question was the downtown Camino del Rio to Animas River. Nothing's been spent on that appropriation.
And if I recall, Sarah Dodson, the Director of Transportation, when she gave her capital projects presentation to council at that study session, I believe several of these were reappropriated or will be in the 2022 budget. And so we should see that as well.
Thank you, Devin.
So for our fund balance for the 2015, we are currently at 2.1 million essentially for the fund balance through the end of September. For the 2019 sales tax fund, so this is our streets, half of the sales tax, we are showing 3.9 again in revenues. We have just around 3 million in expenditures year to date. So coming down through here, I'm not going to repeat what I said about the revenues because it's the same as the 2015 as the other half cent of that. But I will just jump down here into our projects. So once again, that one listed as no project is the transfer into the general fund for streets maintenance. We have the seal coat surface preservation, street overlays, street reconstruction, ADA ramps, alley reconstruction and paving, North College Drive, and the 50/50 sidewalk program. Any questions on this one before I move? Okay, and for a fund balance in the 2019 sales tax fund, we are at $896,338 for end of September.
Never mind, thank you. I'm good, thank you.
No problem. For the lodgers tax fund, revenues versus expenditures. So we are showing 1.9 million in revenues. For expenditures, we are at 1.1 million. Revenues less expenditures is 805. We do have this in a positive position. And this is a little bit tricky because we obviously have the additional quarters, the additional percentages on here, but I did want to make note that the additional 3.25% of the receipts that exceed 900,000, we'll have that set aside since we can only reach that cap this year.
Can you explain why that last month is so much higher in expenses? Was it a special event? That one.
September?
In September?
Yeah. It seems consistently 80,000 and then it's 555.
Looks like a transfer.
Cynthia's got it.
Yeah, it's a transfer.
Once we started collecting the larger amount, we basically had to play catch up a little bit because in those first couple of months of the greater amount, we did not accordingly adjust the transfer out. So we had to play catch up in September. So it appears at a higher
So where's
amount.
the transfer out going?
It's a transfer over to the general fund to offset the
contract payments to.
There was the transit and the admin fee and then the special events.
So
So anyways, we were just truing it up in September so that we were accurate on a year-to-date basis.
But does it mean that the current lodgers tax is basically funding back what we didn't account for properly up until July, I guess?
It would have been only July and August that were off a bit on the expense side because up through June was in the old methodology with the older 2% only. And then once we started collecting the additional amount, we should have been, those that are percentage based should have had an increase in the transfer out so that for transit and the admin fee, which are percentage based, we had to true that up.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And the fund balance that we're showing for the lodgers tax fund is 452,108 as of end of September for Q3. Moving on to our internal service funds. So we have the general services fund. We are showing a cautionary on this particular fund. And that is due to the fact that we're starting to go in the negative with our revenues less expenditures. In the 2022 budget and reconciliation, you will see that we're proposing an increase from what we're collecting out of each one of the funds that contribute to the general services fund. And that is to play catch up. For a while, we had a large fund balance in this particular fund. And so in 2022, we're truing that up as we move forward. For the SURF fund, we are showing a positive. Again, this $5 million of fund balance will be bringing to council for, in reconciliation, a potential for a building fund with some of that additional fund balance that we have in the SURF fund. And again, we've still struggled to get our vehicles that we have purchased because of everyone is with the shortage. So it's not just us.
Can I ask something on that 5 million? The SURF fund pays for the replacement of equipment, vehicles, and does it also include trash trucks, for example? I think actually you answered that before. If it's an existing gas truck, it gets funded out of this fund. If it's a new equipment or an additional line, it comes out of another fund, correct?
That's correct.
So, and that this fund is being split up in 3 different funds, if I understand correct, for the IT and then for the building and information.
And for 2022, yes.
And how was this one funded? I was just wondering, does it all make legal sense? Is it all structurally correct from the charter and ordinance and the whole way this is set up?
So this is funded as an internal service fund. So each one of the funds that utilize repair and maintenance or that have vehicles contribute to this particular fund.
So if an entity with vehicles supports this fund and then we take it out and put it in a fund for buildings, is that correct?
Yes, so I think what Jose, when he was explaining it, was that we would look back and see where the contributions have come from. And so that with the building fund, we would make sure those same contributions were tied back, essentially. Did I say that right?
The bottom line is when we looked at the SURF fund, the departments were contributing, the allocation for the departments were contributing more than what they were actually pulling out. So we were continuing to increase our fund balance. So we needed to go back and take a look at how do we redistribute that to actually correlate with the equipment replacement and maintenance needs that they're using. When we found that out, we also found that we can use that charge at what we were charging, but using it in different areas so that we could also do their IT needs as well as their building maintenance. So the bottom line is they were being, I don't want to use overcharged, but overcharged is an easier way of saying it for their equipment replacement needs. So we're building up a reserve that we really didn't need to do. So we're just reappropriating that for other needs that they will need within their departments and within their funds. So if it's the water fund that's paying for their equipment replacement fund and they've been over, the overage would go into their IT fund to support their IT needs and or their building needs as well.
Yeah, so would this be reduced or will be this fund be this fund will continue to exist?
The fund will continue to exist. It's just not going to be having the revenue entering in every year at the rate that it has been previous years.
And so instead of, how do you go back and allocate this money to the appropriate departments and divisions and the funds where it came from? Instead, you could also just say we close the tap for a year and no more money coming in and we just reduce the balance.
You could do that. That's one way of going about it. The way we were looking at it was being able to redistribute that and take care of technology needs that we needed today, instead of having to use the new revenue that we have right now through other sources to make that purchase happen. So the way that we do it is we can know exactly how much each department has paid into this fund for the past several years, and you can look at the percentage, and then I can let Cynthia talk a little bit more on the allocation and the accounting side of how you're doing it, but we have the historical records of what people have paid into their area and kept in records of exactly how much is being charged, if you will, to each department.
And how much was used by each?
And how much was used, absolutely.
So you have this fund is broken down by department and fund, I guess, where it came from. Then you have that partially used for equipment, which is another breakdown. Then you're going to take whatever you feel is too much, you're going to put it in 2 different funds where you're also going to track each building to which department or fund it belongs to, and then have that. It seems very complex.
It is complex. That's probably why we have internal services funds. It's an area for us to continue to plan out financially, so we know exactly when we have when purchases are coming through, when we're going to replace technology, when we're going to replace our vehicles, and then also when we're going to do our building maintenance. Usually, these funds are very common to have within your city organization, so that again you have a financial plan. You're not hit one year. We're trying to get away from like, oh, we have $1 million of technology. We're just completely doing it every year, so that we're always on a scale to continue to go through. So we're not as affected by downturns, where it's easy to say, oh, okay, we just won't fund these, and then it continues to push it forward. It's an annual commitment to continue to make sure we're taking care of our assets.
But you have to do it for that where it came from.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Okay. You would always say you can have a fund for that where it came from and just have that finance the expenses, because if that's the way it ends up. So if let's say the water fund provides a certain percentage, waste or whatever fund, pick a fund, provide a certain percentage, and then has to pull it out to another fund, and you have to track the expense, you might as well keep it in the first fund in the first place.
Well, it's more than a percentage.
Yeah.
It's not based on a flat percentage, it's based on actually what they're, but it's actually based on their equipment. So what we would look at is if they had a truck, we would amortize that over 4 years. So each year, they're paying a quarter of that truck. So it's not a flat percentage of 15% goes in there. It's actually allocated to the equipment that they're actually having to pay for to replace in the future years.
And I would add the value I see, as I understand it, is it gets us started on planning for what that future maintenance is going to be, and it goes into dedicated pots. So as you use the example of the library needing a new HVAC, the library will have contributed money to the SURF fund. They'll have a certain amount that'll go back, and then it's dedicated to really taking care of building and maintenance so that we're not scrambling and fundraising for a new HVAC system.
Absolutely.
So I see it as proper planning and getting us toward that asset management, that plan that we need to know and develop.
Any other questions on this account? Okay, thanks.
Okay, and finally, we have the Risk Management Fund, which is the fund where we are showing that we have a positive indicator, and we have a fund balance currently at $275,000. For the self-insurance fund, we are, again, positive. These are transferred on a quarterly basis. And so we have that $697,000 as the fund balance. We are working with our benefits broker to determine what the proper amount for a fund balance would be for self-insurance, to help us try and determine what that dollar figure is, what's too much, what's too little, based on claims history and things of that nature. So we will put that forth in the 2022 budget as well. On the enterprise funds, I'm going to start off with water operating. So we are showing 5.9 year-to-date actual and revenues. For expenditures, we are at 2.7. Revenues less expenditures, we're at 3.1. So in the water capital fund, we are showing our revenues. This is a transfer, obviously, so we will be making that transfer from the operating capital into the capital revenue to reflect that. But we have about 1.5 million in expenditures to date on the capital side.
Okay.
As far as the capital projects, this is a listing of what we have. So some of the bigger ones, we have the water line replacement. We have some progress on the electrical upgrade, meter replacement, Santa Rita pump station starts, just to name a few of the larger ones. But you can see at total, we're at 2.1 million for projects. And again, this will follow the same process as the other, where if some of these projects did not get completed, they'll be reappropriated for 2022 for council's consideration. Any questions on the water capital before I keep rolling?
I do, as it relates to the budget process. I just want a clarification. So if we've spent 2 million in the third quarter, 7.8, and maybe we spend 4 million for the year, you'll still have 3.8. So when we're thinking about that capital improvement division, and we talk about 22 million earlier, that tells me that you probably have another 3.4 that you're going to ask to be reappropriated. Would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely. We've just gone through the exercise of working through with the project managers. It looks like it'll be closer to 1 million that we'll be asking. Some of the projects were revised from the description that they currently have, which was a little too broad and wasn't getting accomplished. So we made it a more specific project, say, pipe on at a certain location rather than just pipeline replacement in general. So we've changed it around a bit, but we're anticipating about 1 million that'll come back as either finishing out the tail end of our project or as part of our new projects.
So it's conceivable you could have a slightly larger CIP budget than what you've asked for approval because of.
What I've got on the document I gave you today is the 2022 budget without including the amounts that will need to be reconciled.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can we go back to the revenue and expense page, please?
On the capital or on?
I think it's one more page up. Great. So, are you anticipating that the revenue will actually come in at budget and that the expenses will actually come in at budget? Because right now your budget expenses are $10 million and your actuals are just under $3 million.
So I believe a lot of that has to do with, you see this finance use only here. That's where we make that transfer capital projects. And so I'm going to scroll down here and I can come back up to that one. But we have not made that transfer yet for the capital projects into the capital fund. So once we make that transfer, that would put us, if we had made that 6, so that would put us quite a bit closer on the expenditures.
Sure. So one of the questions that I asked when we did our original budget conversation was, the finance use only doesn't mean anything to anybody. I mean, it could be anything in there. So I think either way it needs to be broken down into transfer to capital, transfer to general fund, whatever it is, and then a description of what you're transferring. Because this is one of the areas where it's so nebulous that anything could be happening there and we don't know what it is.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. We can.
And that's true in every single department.
Sure. We could provide details on that. If I wasn't in the PDF, I'd be able to click down here and it would be able to show us.
I understand. I think that possibly for public consumption, though, if they're looking at our OpenGov and they see something that says finance use only, yes, they might click through it, but I still think that's not a very transparent way of describing what's going on there.
Okay. Yeah, we could definitely work on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the water? Okay, so if we're looking at the fund balances in water operating, we show 11.8 million. In the budgetary fund balance for capital, we're showing 4.9 million. Again, we're at a positive indicator with the water fund overall because we would typically expect to have 71% of our revenues collected. We're currently at 73. And we talked about the expenses there as well, so.
Could you just go up to the fund balances again, please, Devin?
So that's $17 million and it was 11 million last year. And we're working on figuring out what that money was and where it's supposed to be going. So this really is concerning me. Now, I realize that we might have another $6 million that comes out of this maybe, but even with that, we're still increasing our fund balance and we don't actually have a policy on what we're doing there.
I think one of the discussions that the Infrastructure Advisory Board was going to bring up is a water rate likely reduction or refund. And I'd be open to discuss both of them. I think as a council, we should look into that because it's growing. And on top of the comment I had earlier, I am concerned that there's something missing in this number based on the budget comment this afternoon. So.
Shall we recommend to staff that we have a study session to actually, we've been talking about it for at least 8 months now, figuring out what is actually in this balance, what our policy is about how we're using it, and take into account exactly the kind of things that Councilor Bosman's mentioned. Would that work for council to do that?
And if I could add to that, the IAB, because I would have given it in my report, they also talked about a real need to develop a debt policy or adopt the debt policy plan that was developed in the 2014 Rafaelis. So that is again something that they will be discussing at this special meeting. And then again, it came up the possibility, rather than doing a flat fee for the debt, and if there's, X number of users and a flat fee determined to cover that debt, then you may not need the kind of rate increases that everyone pays for. And it might be a more equitable charge than the fees. And so that was part of the discussion before we set a 3% fee.
Great to add to the policy discussion, absolutely.
If I may, and I think just maybe for clarity for myself, we kind of have IAB doing some financial things, and then we also have a SALT FAB committee. And I want to make sure, where does that go with? Because obviously we don't want to step on toes or people say, hey, you forgot us. So when it comes to rate studies, when it comes to, looking at debt policies, looking at, fund balance use, where do you see that line between IAB and SALT FAB, or is it they just go to both, or maybe is it a joint meeting?
I will say that the debt policy was specific to the utilities. It was specific to the study that actually produced those suggested rate increases that they had been wanting to follow. So I think there is recognition that the SALT FAB has a larger citywide thinking, but this was specific to those things they were charged to review.
But I see what Jose is saying, because in reality, the SALT FAB is the financial advisory board. And if you're going to think about bonding for anything, you're going to need some conversations about, do we bond or do we increase rates? And that's their expertise. That's not the IAB's expertise. So in reality, I think that you make a good point, is that the SALT FAB talks about the financial mechanisms, and then that information is given to the IAB in their conversations. But I think that before that even happens, council needs to talk about what are the challenges here? What are we looking to do? What are we trying to achieve? And what's our policies around it? Because once we kind of have a conversation about that, then we can say, all right, we want to look at, if we bonded this, then the SALT FAB needs to do this and the IAB needs to do this. But I think it's premature to make those assignments until we have those conversations.
And if I could add something on this chart, I'm wondering if part of the confusion is we do have a new system. And right now you have these broken out into two funds. But what we've really asked is that the capital be below the line of the operating, and then we see the full picture. So I'm wondering if in the budget presentation, we were seeing these two funds and not seeing the full, complete picture.
The bottom line was the total.
Yeah, oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that, to your point, if maybe, I don't know if this is producible by OpenGov, but if you had a combined, well, maybe all you really need is just one chart, and the chart shows the operating fund, and then on top of that, the capital, so we know what the totals are. You know what I'm saying? Because I see, because it's all one fund.
Right. Yeah, we could look and be able to kind of reflect that differently with OpenGov.
Okay.
I think as a council, maybe we can, maybe I can suggest that we ask the Infrastructure Advisory Board for their recommendation on the rate based on the existing study that was not that old, as well as some options on what to do with the excessive fund accrual.
We don't know what the excess is right now. So that's the question that keeps being asked, is how much was accumulated into this fund based upon the rate study in anticipation of building Ridges Basin Water Treatment Plant. So what was accumulated for capital, and then what was accumulated to pay for operating costs, if you will, or repairs and maintenance? We don't have that answer yet.
So let the Infrastructure Advisory Board come up with some recommendations or their interpretation of how that works.
They don't have that answer yet. That has to come from finance.
And I think that is what when I asked for the special meeting of the Infrastructure Advisory Board yet this week, was to see if they could make a recommendation as we had previously discussed.
And maybe they will ask the finance board.
Any more questions about the water fund, or did you have something else, Allison?
I was just going to suggest there is some lack of clarity about what is in the water fund and why it is at the number that it's at. And I think if we can work with Cynthia and finance, with utilities, if we can provide a pretty good answer to bring to the Infrastructure Advisory Board, because I understand the separation with Salt Fab needing to be the actual financial advisory, but as it applies to utilities, if they have that information, they could probably make a better recommendation on how they see the rate playing out over time. So we can, I'm sure Cynthia wants me to commit some more of her time to something else, but we can try and get that pulled together for the meeting.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions on water? Okay, let's move on, please.
Okay, so sewer operating revenues we're showing at 6.1 million total. Expenses, we are at 6.2. And in the...
Stop there for just a moment.
Yeah, no problem, sorry.
Thank you, thank you. So that finance use only, that 3.7 would probably be some capital improvements?
So we do have the payments.
Or the debt service?
That also comes out of that finance use only.
It would be most of it would be the debt service. Okay, thank you.
And that's another area where
it needs to be clear. It's
Yes.
not capitals, it's debt. Oh, yeah, right, we have to pay that.
Yeah, we can certainly work to make that a little clearer. Again, you can see here on our revenues, we have not made that transfer. At our expenditures, we're showing $770,000 for expenditures. A little bit more if we come over here at 1.5 with our actuals and encumbrances. So that would include anything that we have contracts for specifically. So when we're looking at where we're at with our capital projects to date, some of the bigger ones, we have the Santa Rita Park. We have the Digester 1 interior coating rehab. And then you can see a couple projects where I'm sure Allison can speak to this more, but where we don't have any expenses to. So any of those that need to be proposed again in 2022 will be at the budget. Any questions on the capital before I keep moving?
Yeah, I'm just curious with the Santa Rita Administration Building, because that was an $8 million expenditure plus $8 million, and each water and sewer were each paying half, so $4 million. I'm just curious about why so little has been encumbered when the budget had 10 to 12% times more available.
I could get that information for you.
And I see Allison here. She doesn't have to answer it right now unless she has it, but otherwise it's just, it stands out to me.
I think it was basically broken up over 2 years, and I'm having a little trouble seeing it this distance, but I'm thinking that's probably what it is, that we're showing 1 of 2 years that we're reflecting roughly half that cost.
And it's conceivable you'll get the big expense in the last quarter. I understand that.
So fund balances here once again. So the 10 million in the operating, and we show a negative 6 million in the sewer capital. Once again, this would be a reason to combine those two so that it's not a big concerning number there with that negative 6 million. But with that transfer, that wouldn't be the case with the capital side of that. So we are showing a positive performance indicator. Sewer would typically have around 67% of the revenues collected. Currently, sewer is at 73% of budgeted revenues. So we are showing that as positive. We do have sewer showing spent at 76% and has historically spent 64%. But we expect it to be in with no problem by the end of the year. Any questions before I move on to airport? Okay, so airport operating fund. Revenues, we are at 4 million. Expenses, we are at 2.7 for operating. In capital, we have 840,000 in revenues, and we are showing 445 in expenses. Capital projects that are underway at the airport. You can see we have the terminal expansion design. We have a runway project, the taxiway A project, the south hangar project, and I believe a handful of these projects will be included in reconciliation for the 2022 proposed budget where we weren't able to get some of those projects completed. So any questions on airport capital? Okay. And airport fund balance, so operating we have the 5.6 million, and in airport capital we have 4.1. Again, positive performance indicator, so typically we'd be at about 59% of revenues. Currently we're at 68% of budgeted revenues. Airport has spent 40% of their budget and has historically been at 76% spend. As you know, we continue to recover with COVID, the airport is seeing an increase in traffic, which continues to drive up those revenues. So, Sustainable Services Fund, we are showing revenues for end of September at 2.5, expenses at 2.1. Coming down into our budgetary fund balance, so we have the 2.1 million in operating and the 16,000 in capital. We are showing this fund at a positive. Typically, we'd be at 70% of revenues. Currently, we're at 83%. Sustainable Services has spent 66% and has historically spent 62%. The fund is ahead around 483,000, so no concerns there. Any questions before I jump to transportation? Okay, Transportation Services Fund. So we are showing 3 million in revenues. We have 2.9 in expenses. And for capital projects, we just have the one, which is the meter replacement project. For our fund balances, we have 2.1 in the transit operating and 227,000 in capital. We did list this as cautionary for the transportation fund. So we expect to have 63% of revenues collected. Currently, we're at 67. We do expect to receive about 542 in outstanding reimbursement for federal grants. This is something that we've been working to change in finance, where we recognize that at the time that we request it versus having it show up when we actually receive it. And they are also pursuing a CDOT grant for $150,000 to help with offsetting the expenditures. So, any questions on transportation fund? Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Devin. All right, so now we are on to 14.2, city update.
Yes, Mayor and Council, do have a few things just to point out. First off, we are rolling out updates to the city's website, which includes an AI-based chatbot. The new search function learns and grows the more questions that are asked, so please feel free to go online, visit our website, and ask it questions. The Finance Department is implementing a new online tax and licensing software that will streamline the process and also email reminders for customers. Chapman Hill has added additional public skate times, including the weekly disco nights on Fridays from 7:30 to 9 p.m. and Saturdays from 5:15 to 6:45. We have public skate on Sundays from 2:30 to 5 p.m. Today was the final day for residents to drop off pumpkins and leaves at the fairgrounds as part of a partnership between the city, CSU Extension Office, and area nonprofits. The pumpkins will be donated to local ranchers and farmers, and the leaves will be composted. The police department also was honored to accept a $15,000 donation from the Durango High Noon Rotary for the CORE Co-Responder Program, which pairs law enforcement officers with a behavioral health provider to respond to situations involving people who may be experiencing a behavioral health crisis. That is my update for this evening.
Thank you. Any questions for city manager from council? No? Okay, wonderful.
I do have a thought about thanking the Rotary and what might be an appropriate response, whether to have someone actually attend a session and formally thank them. That's a significant contribution.
Absolutely. I can work with Chief Brammer and come up with some ideas on how to come up with something and
And
make sure we
if-
include the council.
Yeah, I think council representation of anyone that could make it would be good.
Great, good idea, thank you. On to 15, council reports and actions. So councilors, if you have any reports and actions, including your liaison board meetings, please let us know.
Yes, I have two. So I have the airport commission meeting, which was on October 21st. In terms of airport activity, September 2021 passenger traffic finished at a strong 110% of 2019 levels, building upon the busiest summer of all time. Year to date, 2021 passenger traffic is down just 2% from 2019 levels. The terminal development, a formal terminal expansion design project was initiated in September. The goal of beginning construction on phase 1A of terminal development by late 2022. And then the runway 321 rehab project. So they have a full runway closure is scheduled for September 7th of 2022 through September 16th of 2022. So if you're planning on flying out of Durango next September, it won't be that then. So, so that is kind of airport general stuff. And then I also had the Creative Economy Commission meeting on the 26th. So the Art Brigade is done. All 17 projects were fulfilled. It's all updated on their website. They're planning to relaunch a group in February or March for next year. And they have some like good fundraising ideas to hopefully double the amount of money because it was so successful. Pay artists more for doing those pieces, and so on and so forth. A new platform for ranking pieces is they're looking at, and so that could be exciting. The Creative District had a retreat. They have a revised public art plan. They have 8 cultural goals that they've worked on. Okay, so there is a panel discussion. The topic is around Indigenous mascots. That is on December 2nd at 5 p.m. And it's going to talk about the usage, logos, education, awareness. It's at the Durango Arts Center. And so if you can make that, that would be awesome. Common Threads, we tried to see if we could get it, and no, because it's too much traffic there. So, and the visibility isn't good. And so we're still gonna work in the spring to get it where it was intended to go, is the idea. The Story Walk, it was settled that the library is gonna be the location. They have been working with the CRC and help them to make sure it's fully accessible location. The library is helping choose the books. They're working with a local contractor to make the stanchions right now. The same one I think that did Pine River Library. There is an art maintenance RFP that's going out mid-November. Park Elementary mural, there was problems with the artist originally, but they have a new artist and they're hoping to get started soon before it's too cold to paint. And I think that was the Big deal.
So for the common threads, they were looking somewhere else. I don't know where it was.
You were
Okay.
on Zoom, or maybe you jumped off before the. So where they're doing the construction now.
Okay.
They were like, can we put it in there? Like,
Okay.
even if it was like,
Too busy.
Yeah.
So now they're going back to the original 550-160?
Yeah.
Intersection possibly?
In hopes that we can get a bid to get them installed.
Great, okay.
In the spring or something, so.
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
There you go.
Melissa, did you have anything?
I just have I had a CML board meeting on October 15th, and I wasn't able to tell you guys. And there was just a couple things that I thought were interesting in this meeting, because they talked about legislation that they wanted to support for CML and or not support for this upcoming session. And one of them, and that the policy committee is recommending that CML support is legislation to refer a question to voters to amend Tabor to remove the prohibition on real estate transfer tax. And this would be a concurrent resolution and needs 2/3 vote of each chamber to pass. But the intent, of course, is to create source for affordable housing that could be initiated for local governments. And so we will see where that goes with CML, but there was definitely council board support, recognizing it's going to be very difficult to get it passed, but it's such a crisis statewide that we need to try to take whatever action that we can take. So they are looking, and they also recognize that there will be a lot of opposition to it, but they are looking to take a positive stance on that. They're also looking at in regards to affordable housing, short-term rentals, and having them taxed as commercial property versus residential. And currently they are not suggesting that they want to take a policy position on this and support this. They're thinking that this is not a municipal issue, really, but that this is a county issue, and there's lots of discussion around what would trigger what makes it a short-term rental that they think needs to be vetted first. And they are also thinking that there's going to definitely be competing bills out there around this issue in particular, of which they intend to take a stance. So we will be meeting again on December 15th, and those discussions in particular will be, we'll get farther progress on those, and I'll report back then, because I think it'll be interesting to see what their stance is. And we have a housing subcommittee to talk about issues that they're going to support for CML. I am on that subcommittee, so I think our first meeting is Thursday, so I'll keep you posted.
Excellent. Councilor Nosworthy.
Sure, I have a few. Last week, I got to be at the Aspero dedication, the ribbon cutting, and it was just so wonderful to see this building come to completion. And I wanted to just give a shout out to the staff. I know Kevin Hall was involved early on in how to think about that unused piece of property and making it available to Housing Solutions. Vicki Vandegraff, one of the speakers called out for the women who rock and pulled Vicki up there with the rest of the group for tirelessly making things happen and solving problems. And then also Kevin Doherty and his team for the constant review of that design. It is a really remarkable space. And so I encourage the public and certainly council to go up and have a look at that. I think permanent supportive housing took a huge effort from so many groups, and people were so thrilled with the city for being a part of it. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I also wanted to say that the CRC, I attended that meeting, and it's just now ending, but the Latinx subcommittee helped sponsor a Day of the Dead, Dias de Muerte, I think might be how it's pronounced. That was all up at the FLC, so they're reaching out to different community. And the Latinx subcommittee was really also grateful for the work being done with multimodal on the 160 transfer and the translation services that are available. One member did bring up that we do have others in our community who their main language is something other than English or Spanish, and they also may need some services as well, and we should be thinking about that. Levi talked about the Disability and Equity Subcommittee really talked about the problems with snow removal and how that impacts them and their ability to get around. Levi talked about some of the issues and the responsibility of the property owners. And we really talked about, are there more things we can be doing with code, with education, with outreach? And that was some things from even putting flyers in the utility bills. Hey, make certain that you shovel your sidewalks so that everyone can use them easily. It was interesting, one of the persons on the Disability Subcommittee also talked about nationwide, less than 2% of the homes in the USA are accessible. And so as we build rental properties and other developments, do we actually think about within our code what's an appropriate number of those units being accessible, meaning either wheelchair or for people with hearing disabilities, other issues. Let's see. We even talked about maybe using the bid ambassadors to help remind folks about the importance of sidewalk removal and of snow. The Indigenous Subcommittee is working with the creative economy because they also mentioned the community conversation around mascots, and the CRC will be presenting a budget to, I think, Jose, then for our quick approval on expenditures, and one of them does involve some support for this community conversation, so they'll be asking about that. And then this is all in the CRC. Companeros is having a clothing drive on November 10th, and they'll take clothing and cash. And on November 13th, there'll be a no questions asked pickup. So if people in the community need things, they can come there. And then lastly, two more things on that one. I know we're working on the Native American resolution, and that was brought up. And this was an interesting topic that came up to me, and it was in relationship to particularly our rec center. And please, it's actually around making female products within the city facilities free and accessible. So it's just, I can go into greater detail on that with Turi and others, but it was something that they presented to us, that the modest amount that you charge is probably not as important as having something available. The IAB had a really healthy and robust discussion around CIPs, around debt, around funding, and I thought it was probably one of the more meaty discussions I've been involved in. It was really very useful. One of the things that they did talk about was there was eventually the board did vote to recommend that council, with the exception of the Lake Nighthorse, approve the CIP that they're putting forward for water and sewer, even though they recognize that wasn't required of them. They did want to take that stand. They did talk about the debt policy, which I raised earlier, and a real question of what is the work that needs to be done to the 7 million gallon tank, and a real clarity on that and getting that done. And then we came away with a meeting to look at rates. The last thing I just did want to talk about was I did not attend the CAS meeting, in part because I didn't see the return on investment for spending the money to go up there and stay in a hotel when I could review the materials after the fact and have questions. And it also was the same time as the fire district meeting, and I felt that that was very important to be there. But two things in particular stood out to me. Park City Foundation led a community-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion discussion over a course of a year. What does it mean to their community, and what actions look like? And I really felt like we could learn from that. And the main thing is they really set to, to set outcomes rather than just inputs, if you will, to get multiple perspectives and how are we engaging key stakeholders impacted by this program, to think about the unintended consequences of our actions and then communicate and evaluate. And it was a year-long process that might serve as a model for the city as we think about engaging with others, or might be something that the Southwest Community Foundation might be appropriate for engaging in. And then the other item was about sustainable tourism. And the person talked about some of the things that were happening in Sonora and across the country where people are saying no more money spent on tourism, enough, whatever. And they came up with basically it's the Global Sustainable Tourism Coalition. And it's a group of 35 right now, mostly heritage sites, but 3 places in the U.S. are involved: Jackson Hole, Sedona, and Summit County. And I thought this was interesting as we think about those uses for the funding. So when they talk about the environment, and this is what Sedona's doing, the environment and sustainable development, they talk about how to educate tourists to reduce waste prevention and diversion strategies, totally focused on visitors in the area. They talk about how to encourage them to minimize their water usage and protect their water quality. And this one was interesting, particularly in light of the folks who came here tonight on the environment. How can we create new programs to help businesses and visitors moderate energy use and use alternative forms of energy? And I know we got a question from a constituent. Could we use funding to help hotels put in solar panels that could then reduce and help us as a community? So I thought that what Sedona was doing, lessen impacts to the land and then educating visitors. They also had issues on economic activity, interagency, but they talked also about shuttle systems within their sustainable tourism and accommodations. And then finally, I'll end with just really working to disperse visitors across a broader area. So maybe not always having the concentration down in the central business district, but what do we have to offer up in North Main, things like that. So, and their pledges were, I won't read all of them, but their pledges were pretty interesting of what they tried to ask a visitor to do. And one of them was, if I can't find a parking spot, I will not invent my own. I will go with the traffic flow, using my turn signal often and my car horn seldom. And then finally, I'll be caring and considerate wherever I go, because that's the Sedona way. And I just thought, it's nice to learn. I would have liked to have been in person, but it was helpful to learn what another community is doing. So.
Councilor Bosmans.
Yeah, thank you. I had a multimodal advisory board meeting on October 20th, and in line with that, there was some recognition, and I'll copy that here. Hopefully I'll say all the name and the details correctly. Operator of the Month, transit driver Will Hall, was recognized especially for his involvement early on during an accident. So that was well-deserved recognition. They talked about transit routes, potentially to Twin Buttes being negotiated, but as well as more regional routes, including appropriations bill from the Senate for $522,000 for City of Durango and Archuleta County for bus purchase. And then there was a discussion on funding for transit for the long term. The next couple of years should be good, but for the long term, sustainable funding. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Jose and I attended a coordinating committee meeting, which is something that in the respective groups, which is 9R, Fort Lewis College, Pueblo College, the city, and the La Plata County. Is the staff person, generally the city manager or the county manager, and an elected, which is generally the mayor and the chairman. Oftentimes, so for like 9R, a board member. And we kind of get together once a month, and this was our first in public or in-person meeting in a long time, and just kind of update each other on what's going on. And FLC talked a lot about what they're doing for housing and their multiple different ideas of how they might support housing for their teachers and also for students. That was one of the big conversations, was needing housing for students also, particularly up on the college campus. And 9R talked a lot about housing also. But one of the interesting ones too that I thought was very interesting was the question was brought up, okay, suppose we solve the housing issue. We need daycare. So it's really a real challenge in this community. There isn't enough daycare, and it's part of what makes it difficult for a two-income family, for example, or a single parent with children to stay in the community and have an affordable place to live if they don't have daycare. I thought that was very interesting, and one of the topics that we discussed last month that I mentioned was that the elementary school attendees are, there's less and less of them every year. And so this is kind of a wicked cycle, right? If you have less children, there's going to be less impetus for a private company to open daycare. And then if there's no daycare, there aren't going to be as many families moving here. So that's kind of a wicked cycle that they were talking about and figuring out how to deal with. And then also combining their training, like nursing training or construction training and other general education to line up with what jobs are available and making them be in a better paying job position when they graduate. So there's a lot of really interesting conversation going on that's very, very similar to the conversations we're having. But I thought the daycare was an interesting one because we haven't talked about that. And then I have one other question for council. Overall, did you feel that this room was a little warm tonight? Mm-hmm. Okay, great, because I was feeling that also. Maybe we could adjust that a tad bit. Wonderful. Any other discussion or questions? No? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.